Zane Whitmore had grease on his hands, sweat on his brow, and no clue that the woman walking into his garage just after sunset would change his life forever. "Excuse me?" she said, stepping carefully over a wrench on the floor. "My truck broke down just outside of town. Some lights started flashing, and now it won't start." Zane pulled himself out from under an old Ford, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. His hair was tousled, his white tee stained with oil, but his steel blue eyes were sharp and curious. "You got it towed here?" "No, it's parked about 2 miles down the road." She paused, clearly unsure if walking into this place had been a mistake. "The check engine light came on, then it just died. I tried calling roadside, but I lost signal. Someone gave me directions to your garage." "Well, they weren't wrong," Zane said, tossing the rag onto the workbench. "I'm the only mechanic in town who works past 5. You're lucky I couldn't sleep." The woman gave a tight smile and extended her hand. "Dahlia Cross. Sorry for the late visit." Her handshake was firm, but her skin was soft. She didn't belong in a place like this. Her clothes were simple, a button-up shirt, jeans, boots, but everything about her screamed that they were expensive. Even her posture had this polished confidence that didn't come from small-town living. "Zane," he said, nodding. "You got a ride here?" "I walked." Zane blinked. 2 miles? In boots like that? Didn't have much of a choice. He whistled under his breath and grabbed his keys. "You wait here. I'll go get your truck." "You don't have to, you walked 2 miles. I'm not letting you walk back." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then nodded. "Thanks." 20 minutes later, Zane pulled the battered black pickup into his garage. It looked tough on the outside, but the engine was a mess. After one look under the hood, he whistled low. "You weren't kidding. This thing's barely breathing." He glanced back at her. "You need it by tomorrow? If that's possible." Zane scratched his jaw. "It's gonna take all night, but I'll do what I can. I'll pay whatever you charge." He shot her a glance. "That's not why I'm offering." Dahlia tilted her head. "Then why are you?" He shrugged. "Call it decency. Or maybe I'm just curious what a woman like you is doing driving an old truck into nowhere Colorado at night." Her lips twitched. "Maybe I like small towns. You don't look like you've ever stepped foot in one before today." She didn't answer. Zane gestured toward the small kitchenette across the garage. "There's coffee if you want it. It's terrible, but it's hot. I'll take it." As she sipped from a chipped mug, Zane got to work. He didn't ask more questions. There was something guarded about her, and he wasn't about to push. But every now and then, he'd glance over and catch her watching him. Not in a flirty way, more like she was trying to figure him out. By sunrise, the engine purred like it was new. Dahlia had dozed off on the old leather couch in the corner, her head resting on her arm. Zane wiped his hands and walked over, crouching beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "It's done." Her eyes fluttered open. She blinked at him, then sat up abruptly. "Seriously? Try it yourself." When she turned the key and the truck started without a cough, she looked up at him like he'd just saved her life. "You're amazing," she said, stepping out and facing him. "I don't even know how to thank you." Zane rubbed the back of his neck. "Just don't break it again 2 miles from here." She laughed. Actually laughed, and it was the first time he saw her relax. "I'll be back," she said suddenly. "Later today. I have to take care of something, but I'll come back. And not just to pay you." Zane raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to, I want to." Her voice dropped. "There's something I need to give you. It's important." Before he could ask, she was already climbing into the truck. "Wait, what is it?" "You'll see," she said, her eyes meeting his in the morning light. "I promise." And then she was gone. Zane stood alone in the quiet of the garage, staring at the spot where her truck had just been. Something about the way she'd said it stirred something in him. Like she was carrying a secret just barely held together. He didn't know what she was coming back with, but he had a feeling it was going to change everything. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Zane rolled the garage door halfway shut, more out of habit than need. He wasn't tired, not really. His body should have been aching after working through the night, but his mind was wired. He kept replaying her last words in his head. There's something I need to give you. It's important. He'd had plenty of customers come through over the years, but no one like her. No one who walked in like she didn't quite belong anywhere, who looked at him like she was deciding whether to trust him with more than just a busted engine. He spent the morning trying to distract himself. He replaced the brakes on a local rancher's Suburban, sorted through a shipment of parts that had come in late, and ignored the way his eyes kept flicking toward the road every time a vehicle passed by. It was just past noon when an unfamiliar black SUV pulled up outside the garage. The door opened, and she stepped out. But this time she wasn't in jeans. She wore tailored pants the color of deep wine and a pale blouse tucked neatly at the waist, the kind of outfit you didn't wear unless you had people expecting you to look a certain way. Her hair was twisted into a low knot, and she had a leather folder tucked under one arm. Zane met her halfway. I didn't expect you to come back looking like you're about to close a deal on a skyscraper. You're not far off, she said, holding his gaze. Can we talk inside? He led her into the garage office. It wasn't much, just a scratch desk, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out over the yard, but it was quiet. She sat, setting the folder on the desk between them. I didn't lie to you, she began. But I didn't tell you the full truth either. Zane leaned back, arms crossed. You're not exactly the type who needs to explain herself to a mechanic. You're not just a mechanic, she replied, her voice steady. And I didn't come back to settle a bill. She opened the folder and slid a set of documents toward him. He didn't touch them. What am I looking at? It's a title transfer. For land about 15 miles out. A house, too, though it's not much more than a shell now. Zane frowned. Why are you bringing this to me? Because it was supposed to be yours. His jaw tightened. Excuse me? She folded her hands, every inch of her composed, but there was strain around her eyes now. My father, Nathaniel Cross, died last year. We weren't close, especially near the end. He left most of his estate to the board, the company. But he left something else too. Something that didn't go through the lawyers. She pushed a second paper his way, a letter, handwritten. Zane stared at the familiar looping scrawl. He gave that to you? He asked our family lawyer to deliver it to someone named Zane Whitmore in Ridge Hill. But the lawyer retired before it ever happened. I found it was some of his personal things after the funeral. Zane's face was unreadable. Why would your father leave anything to me? I don't know. You expect me to believe that? I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm just giving you what was meant for you. Zane finally picked up the letter, his fingers stiff. He didn't read it. Not yet. He was my father too, Dahlia added quietly. Zane's head snapped up. What? I only found out a few months before he passed. My mother was complicated. She told me the truth when she was in hospice. Said she'd kept it from both of us. I didn't even know your name until I read that letter. Zane's voice was low, but steady. So you show up here with a land deed and a story about shared blood and expect me to what? Be grateful? I didn't come for thanks. I came because I didn't want to carry this secret alone. Because he should have told you himself, and he didn't. And because no matter how you feel about him, or me, you deserve to know. Zane stood slowly. He walked to the window, staring out at the empty lot behind the garage. You think I want anything from that man? No, she said. I think you deserve the choice. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he turned. What about you? You get the penthouse, the shares, the press releases. What do you get from giving me this? Her expression flickered, just for a moment. Maybe a little peace. Maybe a shot at something honest. Zane's eyes narrowed. Why now? She hesitated, then reached into the folder again and pulled out a photograph. It was faded, the edges curled. A man with dark hair held a baby, grinning like the world had stopped turning just for that moment. That was taken in this town, she said. I found it with the deed. He wasn't the man I hoped he'd be. But I think once he tried. Zane took the photo without a word. Outside, the wind shifted. Clouds were rolling in from the west, heavy and dark. Dahlia stood, smoothing her blouse. I'll leave you with the papers. You don't owe me anything. Just. If you decide to sign them, the notary's address is on the last page. He nodded once, still not speaking. As she reached the door, she paused. I'm staying at the Old and Off Maple, if you have questions. Then she walked out, the click of her heels fading into gravel. Zane stood alone in the office, the letter still unopened in his hand, the photograph in the other. And for the first time in years he wasn't sure where he belonged. Rain came late that afternoon, the kind that didn't pound but crept in steadily, soaking everything before you realized it. Zane stood under the rusted awning outside the garage, watching the water bead on the hood of a half-finished rebuild. The letter still sat unopened in the office, untouched since she left. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He'd taken the photo, tucked it into his wallet, and tried to pretend the contents of that folder didn't exist, but they did. And so did she. He didn't need to open the letter to believe her. The photo had been enough. But belief didn't erase years of silence. Or the fact that the man who'd left him and his mother in a trailer with a broken roof had gone on to build an empire. And a second family? So why leave anything to him now? Zane stepped back inside and closed the door behind him. The rain muffled the world. He sat at the desk, pulled the letter close, and finally tore the envelope open. The handwriting was careful, the ink slightly faded. He read it once, then again, slower. Zane, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. I should have been there. I should have written. But I never stopped thinking about you. Not once. You were the best thing I ever did, and I ruined it before I ever got the chance to try. I've left something behind for you. It's not enough, but it's what I have. I hope you find peace in it, or at least something that makes the world feel less cruel. I'm sorry I didn't know how to be a father. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to try. Nathaniel Zane folded the letter and slid it into the drawer. It didn't change anything, not really. But it cracked something open inside him. Something raw. That night, he didn't go home. Instead, he drove through the rain, winding through wet roads until the town faded behind him and the trees thickened. The property was easy to find. It still had the old mailbox, rusted and leaning, with a name scratched off in block letters and no new one written in. He parked and stepped out. The house was small. Weathered wood, a sagging porch, and windows boarded up from storms long past. But the foundation was solid. The land around it stretched wide, with wildflowers tangled in the overgrown grass and a view of the hills in the distance. It was the kind of place someone had once meant to fix but never did. He walked the perimeter slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, listening to the rain hush across the trees. And then he saw a light. Back at the road, a pair of headlights cut through the mist. The SUV pulled to a stop behind his truck. She stepped out, an umbrella already open above her head. I figured you'd come, she said. Zane didn't answer right away. He watched her approach, her shoes sinking slightly into the wet ground. You've been here before, he said finally. Twice. Once when I was a kid. I didn't know what it meant then, just that it was one of his projects. The second time was after he died. I thought maybe it would help to see it again. It didn't. Zane turned back toward the porch. Why didn't he fix it? I think he meant to. But something always pulled him back to the city. He was a man who made promises faster than he could keep them. Zane glanced at her. And you? What do you keep? She looked him in the eye. My word. Even when it hurts. They stood in silence, the rain light on the umbrella between them. I read the letter. he said. And? He wrote it too late. I know. He took a breath. I don't want anything from his estate, and I don't care about the land. But I need to know, why did you really come back after last night? Her jaw tightened, but her gaze didn't waver. Because last night I saw someone who's never had a damn thing handed to him, and still gave a stranger his time, his skill, and his decency. You don't owe me anything. But I owe you the truth. He narrowed his eyes. What truth? She hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled something from the inner pocket. She handed it to him. It was a folded document. A trust. My mother set it up when I was a teenager, she said. It was meant for emergencies. She didn't trust my father's world. I've never touched it. But it's mine, and I don't want it. I want to use it to fix this place. Zane frowned. Why would you do that? Because this was his unfinished promise to you. And now it's mine. He stared at the paper in his hands, then at the house behind them. I don't need your money. I'm not offering it as charity. I'm offering it as restitution. For what he never gave. For what I never thought to question until it was too late. Zane looked at her, then really looked. Her posture, her voice, her words. She wasn't trying to buy her way out of guilt. She was trying to stand in it. With him. You really think money can fix this place? He asked. No. But it can buy the materials. And maybe that's a start. Zane folded the document and handed it back. You want to fix it? Then don't write checks. Pick up a hammer. Her eyes widened just slightly. Are you serious? He nodded. You want to be part of this? Then be part of it. I've got blueprints in my head and calluses on my hands. You in? She didn't hesitate. I'm in. Zane looked at the house. The porch sagged, the roof needed replacing, and the inside was likely worse than the outside. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a ruin. It felt like a beginning. He glanced sideways at her. You ever used a nail gun? Not yet. Well, he said, heading toward the porch, you're about to learn. By the end of the week, the porch had been gutted and rebuilt. Dahlia stood on the newly laid planks, her palms blistered, her blouse long replaced by cotton shirts rolled to her elbows. Her nails were chipped, her voice hoarse from laughing too hard at Zane's sharp-tongued commentary on her city's slicker hammer grip, and there was sawdust in her hair. But for the first time in years, she wasn't performing for anyone. Zane stepped out of the house behind her, wiping his forehead with a rag. The sun was sinking behind the hills, casting long shadows across the field. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes on her. You're not bad with a circular saw, he said. Took you a few days, but you stopped trying to use it like a curling iron. She didn't look at him. That was one time. And I wasn't trying to curl anything. Looked like it from where I was standing. Next time I'll aim it at your boots. He grinned, but his voice softened. You stayed. She turned, surprised by the shift in tone. You told me to pick up a hammer. Didn't mean you'd still be here a week later. She stepped down onto the grass, wiping her hands. You didn't ask me to leave. He studied her. You could have just given me the trust document and walked away. Why didn't you? Her expression shifted. Because I didn't want to be another person who handed you something and disappeared. I didn't come here to pretend I was innocent in all of it. I've done a lot of things to protect my father's name, even after he was gone. But I kept thinking about that truck. How you fixed it without asking for anything. That's just who I am. No, she said, stepping closer. That's who you chose to be. Despite everything. Zane looked down at the ground, then back at her. You're not who I expected. I don't think I ever was. Not even to myself. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded blueprint. He handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully. It was a sketch of the house, updated, expanded. A second level. A wraparound porch. A studio off the back. I found it in a drawer in the garage, he said. I drew it when I was 17. I used to think, if I ever had the money, I'd build it myself. But then I stopped thinking about things like that. She traced the lines with her finger. It's beautiful. It's ambitious. So? He took the paper back and folded it again. It was just a dream. She stepped back up onto the porch and looked him in the eye. Then let's build it. Zane studied her. You sure? I'm not going anywhere. And I don't want to go back to what I had. All the parties, the boardrooms, the people watching you for the wrong reasons. I don't want that life anymore. He took a breath, quiet and deep. What do you want? She smiled, genuine, tired, and a little unsteady. This. Something real. Something I build with my own hands. With someone who sees through all the polished edges. Zane stepped forward, closing the space between them. You're not the only one who's tired of pretending. Dahlia looked up at him, the air thick with unspoken things. Then stopped pretending. He didn't hesitate. His hand reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, and then he kissed her slow, steady, like he wasn't trying to prove anything. Like he'd already made up his mind. When they pulled apart, Zane rested his forehead against hers. Your trouble. I've been told. That blueprint? He said. It's not the hard part. The hard part's letting someone else help build it. She leaned in closer, her voice almost a whisper. Then maybe we start small. Zane nodded. One room at a time. The following weeks moved fast. The town started to notice. Supplies that hadn't been ordered in years were suddenly on backorder. Trucks came and went from the property at odd hours. People whispered about the Whitmore boy and the woman with the high heels turned work boots. But no one asked questions. Not when they saw the way she carried lumber without flinching, or the way he looked at her like she was the first sunrise he hadn't missed in years. They framed the second floor together. Painted the walls by hand. She learned to install windows. He learned to drink tea without making a face. One evening, she came down the stairs wearing jeans with paint on the knees and found a dress box sitting on the rebuilt kitchen island. She frowned. What's this? Zane didn't answer. He just nodded toward it. Inside was a dress not flashy, not tight. Simple. Midnight blue. Elegant in a way that felt like her, not the woman she used to pretend to be. She turned to him, startled. What's this for? He didn't answer. Just held up a key. Put it on, he said. We're going somewhere. She did. They drove in silence through the hills, the sky bleeding into stars. He parked at the edge of a cliff that overlooked the valley below, where the lights of the town shimmered in the distance. A small table had been set up, a thick cloth, 2 chairs, and a lantern in the center. A thermos waited beside 2 glasses. And behind it, a string of warm lights hung between 2 trees. She stared, stunned. Zane. I built it while you were upstairs. Figured we deserved at least one finished room tonight. She turned to him, emotion catching in her throat. He stepped forward, holding out a small velvet box. I don't have a yacht, he said. Or a penthouse. But I've got this house. I've got these hands. And I've got a heart that hasn't stopped chasing you since that night you walked into my garage looking like you didn't belong anywhere. She opened the box. The ring was simple. A single deep sapphire set in a band of brushed white gold. I didn't want perfect, he said. I wanted real. And somehow, real turned out to be you. Her breath caught. Yes. He blinked. I haven't asked yet. You didn't need to. She threw her arms around him, the ring clutched in her fist, and kissed him like she was choosing him all over again. They stood there, surrounded by pine and stars and the scent of wood smoke, the night humming around them. Later, when they returned to the house, she unlocked the front door with the key he'd given her. Together, they stepped inside, not into a ruin, but into something they'd built with their own hands. A home. Not inherited. But earned. Zane adjusted the collar of his button-down shirt, unfamiliar with the sensation of fabric that hadn't been worn down by years of oil and sawdust. The town hall had been transformed for the evening, string lights wrapped around the beams, soft jazz floating through the air, tables draped in linen with wild flowers arranged in mason jars. It was Ridge Hill's annual Founders' Gala, a small town tradition he'd avoided for most of his life. Until tonight. He stepped through the doors, scanning the room until he found her. Dahlia stood near the far wall speaking with the mayor's wife, her laugh easy, her spine relaxed. Her dress was made of flowing green silk, the kind that whispered around her legs with every movement. He hadn't seen it before. She must have kept it hidden until now. As if sensing him, she turned. Her expression lit instantly, something in her eyes softening as he made his way toward her. "You clean up well," she said, brushing her fingers against his arm once he reached her side. "I feel like I borrowed someone else's life," he replied. She leaned in slightly. "Then I'm glad you borrowed this one." He kissed her temple, the gesture natural now. "You ready to make this official?" She threaded her fingers through his. "I've been ready since the day we tore down that porch railing." They stepped up to the small stage together, flanked by a handful of curious townspeople and a justice of the peace who'd been coaxed out of retirement by the mayor's insistence that a town should witness a love like this. No one had expected it. Zane Whitmore, the quiet mechanic, and the woman who'd driven into town with nothing but a broken truck and a name people only recognized from Forbes articles and quarterly reports. But here they were, standing in front of everyone, not as halves of two different worlds, but as something entirely new. The ceremony was brief. They'd asked for no speeches, no fanfare. Just vows and a promise spoken aloud. Zane's voice was steady. "You walked into my life like a storm I didn't see coming. You challenged everything I thought I knew about where I came from and what I deserved. You made me believe I didn't have to carry the weight of someone else's silence anymore. I choose you every day, every version." Dahlia's throat tightened, but her voice didn't falter. "You saw me when I didn't know who I was anymore. You never asked me to be more or less than I am. You gave me a home I didn't expect to find in places I never thought to look. I choose you without conditions, without escape routes." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the room erupted. Applause echoed against the old beams, neighbors clapped strangers on the back, and someone shouted that the bar should stay open all night, which it did. Later, after the tables were cleared and the band had packed up, Zane and Dahlia drove back to the house. Not a hotel, not a honeymoon suite. Just home. The house was almost finished now. The second level stood proud, the studio behind it fully outfitted with tools and woodwork benches. The kitchen was warm, lights dimmed low, the scent of lavender and pine lingering from a candle she'd lit that morning. He carried her over the threshold, not because she asked him to, but because he couldn't imagine not doing it. "I forgot how quiet it is here," she whispered as he set her down, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "That's why I stayed all those years," he said. "No one expects anything when there's nothing but trees around you." She turned toward him, pulling the pins from her hair one by one. "We built something out of the silence." He reached out and brushed his thumb across her cheek. "We did." They stood there for a long moment, the weight of everything they'd overcome settling around them not like a burden, but like something sacred. "I sold the rest of my shares," Dahlia said softly. 3 days ago. I didn't want it to define me anymore." Zane didn't flinch. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," she said. "I'm starting something new. A foundation. For girls in foster care who age out of the system. They don't get the kind of help they should. I want to change that." He nodded once, pride flickering across his face. "That sounds like you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "And this is for you." He opened it carefully. Inside was a deed, his name printed clearly across the top. "You gave it back to me," he said quietly. "You were never going to sign it," she replied. "So I did. It's your land. Your legacy. I just helped dust it off. He set the envelope on the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the last of the night faded into the early edges of dawn. They danced in the living room to no music, bare feet on unfinished floors, her head tucked beneath his chin. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby. Months passed. Spring turned the hills green again. The garden they planted behind the house bloomed with wild roses and tomatoes. She took morning calls on the back porch, laptop balanced beside coffee mugs. He started taking on apprentices from the local high school, showing them how to build more than just engines. One morning, she appeared in the garage doorway, her expression unreadable. He wiped his hands on a towel and looked up. What happened? She held up the small white stick, her fingers trembling. He stared at it, then at her. Are you sure? She nodded, eyes glassy. I'm pregnant. Zane walked to her without a word, his rough palms cupping her face, and kissed her with a reverence that made her knees weaken. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. That night they sat on the porch, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently on her stomach. You worried? She asked. No, he said. Not if it's with you. A year later, the house stood finished in every way. The nursery was painted a soft gray, bookshelves lined with stories they couldn't wait to read aloud. The town had thrown them a baby shower complete with a cake shaped like a toolbox and a blanket handmade by the mayor's wife. Their daughter was born on a windy afternoon in March. She had Dahlia's mouth and Zane's eyes. They named her Ever. She grew up with dirt under her nails and lullabies sung from the cab of an old truck. She learned to walk across the porch they rebuilt together, and her first word was light, spoken while staring up at the stars. Zane built her a treehouse. Dahlia read to her from a rocking chair by the window. They grew older, together, never needing anything more than what they'd made. Their story didn't end in a penthouse or a boardroom. It ended here, where wildflowers grew between the cracks in the porch steps, where forgiveness shaped the walls as much as timber did, and where love unexpected and unrelenting built a home that would never fall apart.